It is a real pleasure to be with you, wherever you are in the world, to close out the Yidan Prize ceremony and summit. It is good to remain connected through a common cause during a difficult time. Since its inception in 2016, the Yidan Prize has been awarded to some of the most remarkable changemakers of our time. People like Sir Fasleh Hassan Abed, who passionately championed early childhood development. Innovators like Professor Anand Agarwal, founder and CEO of an egalitarian online learning platform, and Ms Vicky Colbert, advocating for an education model now adopted in 19 countries. Researchers like Professor Carol S. Dweck, a world leader in the field of motivation, and Professor Usha Goswami, a world-leading researcher in the fields of literacy, neuroscience and education, and drivers of policy like the statistician Professor Larry Hedges. While the format of today's event is different to any that has gone before, the prize winners we honour today are also in this fine tradition. My congratulations go to all the prize winners today, to Professor Carl Wyman and to Lucy Lake and Angie Muramiwa of CAMFED, of which I am a very proud patron. Meeting virtually like this, rather than in person, reminds us that 2020 has not been the year any of us wanted or anticipated. It has brought illness to nearly 60 million and the deaths of around 1.4 million people, all as the result of a virus none of us knew the name of on New Year's Day. What started as a health crisis has become an economic one, as millions upon millions of jobs have been lost and businesses have been forced into bankruptcy. And it is also a learning crisis. COVID-19 has caused an unprecedented disruption to children's education, in which over 1 billion students were forced out of their classrooms. In the education community, we knew as schools started to close that this could be the end of the dreams of a better future for millions of children. Indeed, it could create a lost generation. In some countries, like my home of Australia, children moved to online learning. In many countries, this wasn't possible. In sub-Saharan Africa, for example, only half of all households have electricity and fewer than 1 in 10 students has a computer at home. Earlier, more localised epidemics like Ebola had taught us the hard lesson that the longer schools are closed, the greater the risk that millions of children in developing countries will experience a lifetime of poor learning. And that same past experience tells us that the problems are even greater for girls. For example, when Sierra Leone reopened its schools after the 8-month Ebola shutdown, thousands of adolescent girls were unable to resume their education because they'd been subjected to child marriage, become pregnant, had gone to work to feed their families, or all of the above. With COVID-19, given its size and scale, it has been estimated that as many as 10 million adolescent girls may never return to school. For girls and boys alike, the consequences of school closures are felt as the loss of opportunity to learn, but the negative impacts are far broader. Without access to school, millions of children can go without a daily meal, a safe place to play, or protective services and emotional support. Critical classroom-based health programs also grind to a halt. With growing economic pressures and without the protection of schools, 2020 may bring a rise in child labour rates for the first time since the year 2000, reversing 2 decades of hard-won progress. Even as the health crisis abates and vaccines come on stream, hard days lie ahead. Facing the biggest economic recession in decades, governments will be forced to make difficult choices about budgets and priorities. Our challenge, the challenge of everyone at this summit, will be ensuring that education remains front and centre of recovery efforts, that dollars spent today by domestic governments or through foreign aid programs or philanthropy are seen as investments in the future, not a drain on current resources. Money is a vital part of the response, but this education crisis must be fought with all tools at all levels, from the most localised community response to global initiatives. CAMFED, the Campaign for Female Education, knows about the importance of meeting people where they are and working with them for change for their daughter, their village, their suburb, their town, their nation. With its deep local engagement, CAMFED saw immediately what the pandemic was going to do to learning, that online and radio schooling was failing to reach the most marginalised children, and that other non-government organisations were pulling staff out of communities when they were needed the most. In response, CAMFED continued to mobilise their decentralised network of community leaders and learner guides, pushing for links to services, safeguarding and supporting children, tracking and tracing marginalised children. It's an approach that has worked. But you may be asking yourself, who are these community leaders? Where did these learner guides come from? The answer to those questions unlocks the essence of what is so different and special about CAMFED. For CAMFED, educating girls is vital, but it isn't enough. Rather, CAMFED believes in empowering young women to be agents of change, recognising that they can become climate-smart activists, health professionals, educators and entrepreneurs across their countries. CAMFED's model is deliberately holistic, recognising the need to address all the barriers that block a family's ability to send their children into school, from food insecurity to ill health. CAMFED knows that a siloed approach to improving education will not work. Budgets and services need to be joined up in the interest of the child, and particularly in the interest of the most marginalised child. CAMFED also brings data, evidence and research findings directly from communities where they work. This allows them to avoid bureaucratic hurdles and uses data to enfranchise communities and advocates. Where does this process end? The answer is with empowered, active women who have the ability to lead their communities through a crisis like a pandemic, whilst mentoring and teaching the most marginalised girls and helping them to become the next generation of leaders. Yidan's newly announced Council of Luminaries, I think, understands the role of education and seeks to use knowledge in a similar way to CAMFED, to bridge the gap between research and quality evidence and on-the-ground solutions. Close collaborations among leaders in education have always been important, but will be ever more so as we build back better in the months and years to come. Agile, responsive and evidence-based solutions will be required as we grapple with the effect that COVID-19 has had on our children's education. These solutions will also need to be delivered at scale. The Global Partnership for Education, which I chair, has pioneered education initiatives and taken them to scale to advance quality learning, equity and inclusion in education. During the pandemic, GPE mobilised our most rapid and largest emergency response. GPE's COVID-19 fund is helping governments sustain learning for up to 355 million children in lower income countries, with a sharp focus on those hit hardest by school closures: girls, children with disabilities and children from the poorest backgrounds. By acting at the right time and at scale, GPE provided dedicated funding of over $500 million to partner countries, making GPE the single largest source of grants to education as part of the worldwide response. The challenge in education is so large that we need all of us, global multilateral funds and empowered local community leaders, nation-state resources and agile philanthropy, researchers and activists, all playing our part in concert. We must judge ourselves against the most demanding of standards. The words, "leave no child behind," are not a slogan. Rather, they are the benchmark to which we must all deliver. Speaking to you near the close of 2020, I feel a sense of optimism starting to take hold. This year has been one of immense challenge, but the power of science is winning through. 2021 will test us, but it will also be the time in which we can fairly globally share vaccines, hope and renewal. In these darkest days, we have researchers, academics, thinkers, advocates and leaders. We had them all come together and rapidly work on health solutions. In 2021, with that same spirit of collaboration, energy and activism, the education community must come together and build a better future. In mid-2021, the United Kingdom and Kenya will host a financing summit to raise funds in response to the Global Partnership for Education's call to raise at least $5 billion for education for the world's poorest countries. This will be a moment to come together and to rally. Each and every day of 2021, unapologetic champions of change will be building a better world through enabling children to seize and shape the best possible future. Amongst their number will be Angie and Lucy, who consistently show us all what real leadership looks like, what it means to lead by listening, to measure yourself by how you empower others. It is a tremendous privilege to me to see up close how Angie and Lucy bring to life the leadership values which are so often spoken of, but so rarely lived out in reality: humility, authenticity, passion, perseverance. Also amongst their number is Professor Carl Wyman, who is pioneering the use of new pedagogies in STEM education, transforming the way STEM education is taught in major universities around the world. Surely at the end of 2020, humanity's debt to science and reason has never been clearer. Our future STEM thinkers, researchers and practitioners will be pivotal to vanquishing the problems of tomorrow, and Professor Wyman is ensuring that their education is one of the highest quality. And amongst the change makers will be the individual researchers and innovators on the Council of Luminaries, who believe in the power of education to build a better world and transform lives. It is an honour to join each of these great change makers at this event. My thanks also go to Dr. Charles Chen Yidan. Without his generosity and foresight, his belief that education is the ultimate driving force for social progress, we would not be joined in this celebration. Friends, Dr. Chen is so right. Let his wise words and a spirit of optimism and energy carry us into 2021 and beyond, with our determination to build a better world for every child renewed. I thank you.